Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. This is Sunday night, December 29, 2019. Somewhere in between Christmas and New Year's. And you're on the Bible Forum. The Bible Forum is here live every Sunday night from 8 to 10 Eastern. Looking at life through a biblical lens, trying to solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. Bible Forum's a ministry of alternatives, Biblical Counseling and Education Incorporated. It's 501c3 corporation. That means all donations are tax deductible. And we would encourage you, if you can, to help. This sort of thing is rather expensive. We have some folks who are faithful in giving. It doesn't cover the costs, obviously. It's a ministry. Ministries rarely get costs covered. But we'd appreciate it if you had a few extra shekels, or if you wanted to put us on a regular thing, we would really appreciate it. You can send a check. You email me at thebibleforum@gmail.com. I'll give you an address. Or you can use the PayPal system. On our website, thebibleforum.net, there's a donate button that takes you to PayPal. But either way, we'd really appreciate that. We're here every Sunday night live from 8 to 10 p.m. We have a weekly email that goes out. We'd love for you to get it. If you'd like to sign up, again, just email me, thebibleforum@gmail.com. We'll put you on the mailing list. 1 letter a week, that's all. This week, there almost wasn't a letter. Didn't get a chance to do it on Saturday. I was out of town. Had to do it today. We've got a lot of stuff in the news. A lot of things are happening in the news this week. One of the things that's happening is an event that just made the newsreel. Just got on the line, just came out. Didn't have time to put it in the regular rotation. And I was going to save it for next week, but it's so pertinent to what we're doing and what's going on in this world, I thought by next week it would be old news. It's going to be everywhere. But somewhere in the Lone Star State of Texas this morning, so folks gathered in church for worship, and as they were seated and waiting apparently for something to take place, the pastor was standing up with his hands just kind of looking. Maybe it was, choir was going to sing, or something was going to happen, or maybe we're just waiting to start. A man down in the front got up and turned around and asked another man who was sitting along the edge a question. That man eventually stood up, and as he stood up, the man who had originally gotten up reached behind his coat, pulled out what looked like a sawed-off shotgun or a small rifle of some sort, and shot the man dead. The man sitting a little bit away from him, he stood up and reached in his back pocket to get his gun. The man shot him too. But there was another gentleman who was maybe about 30 feet away, and while all this was going on, he just reached around the holster, picked up his gun, and went bang. Man went down, dead. As the video continued in the church, there were upwards of 6, 7 men who showed up within seconds, all of them pointing guns. That's what we've come to in America. You take your gun to church? I do. The last 6, 8 years that I pastored, this sort of thing was coming up and starting to happen. And I had a gun in my pants pocket. Anytime I went to church, I had my pistol with me, a little .38. Nobody saw it, didn't talk about it. It was just there. In that church, there were probably 3 or 4 other men. I gave them permission. They carried a gun too. In our church here in South Carolina, there's probably a dozen guys, gals too, who are well heeled. South Carolina is different. North Carolina, about New Jersey, New York. Some of these states where they don't really cotton to guns a whole lot. What are you going to do when somebody walks in and starts shooting? The world is changing. We've got to get in the game. According to Iran's state TV, their Navy on Friday kicked off an unprecedented joint naval drill with Russia and China in the northern part of the Indian Ocean. The 4-day exercise launched from the southeastern port city of Chabahar in the Gulf of Oman and near the border with Pakistan is aimed at boosting security in the region's waterways. That, according to Iran's Navy Chief Admiral Hossein Khanzadi. The joint exercise is the first one of its kind. It comes at a time of great tension since the United States withdrew from a landmark 2015 nuclear deal with Iran last May. Gradually, Iran began to breach elements of the agreement. The biblical implications here: Iran, probably the strongest Muslim nation in the Middle East. China, the strongest army in the East. And Russia, the strongest army in the North. Biblical eschatology brings all three of these players to bear on Israel during the Great Tribulation. Names them that way. The enemy from the north, from the east, from the south, with the Western nations being the buffer, trying to help Israel and keep peace in the region. We're starting to see it get going pretty good. We've heard a lot this week about the economy. How strong do you think our economy really is? According to a new economic data that has been released by the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta, the lowest earning American workers saw the largest income gains of any, larger than the top earning professionals over the past year. Median wage growth for the bottom 25% of workers hit 4.5% for the 12-month period ending in November. CBS News says this exceeded the 2.9% gain in median earnings for the top 25% of earners. The Fed's economic data contradicts claims by leading 2020 Democrats who say the economy under President Trump has left behind lower and middle income families. So, what's driving the higher wages? Well, economic analysts are pointing to the gains among low-income workers. They show record low unemployment figures under President Trump, though the data does show the wage trend began in 2014. It's just not being hindered and actually being encouraged. Several state and local governments have increased the minimum wage in recent years, and that would push up the relative pay for those in the lowest paying jobs. Minimum wage hikes may be a factor as well. What is the most popular Bible verse in this year, 2019? What would you guess? Well, ChristianHeadlines.com, quoting YouVersion's 400 million users, says the verse is Philippians 4:6. That verse says, "Be careful for nothing," an Elizabethan way of saying be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known unto God. What does it say about us as a nation? Are we moving in that direction, or is it really coming unglued? The United Methodist Church is in a turmoil right now. They have something in their system called the Book of Discipline. The Book of Discipline for the United Methodist Church is their guiding principles. They don't call it the Book of Discipline, they just call it the Discipline. I used to be a Methodist. Apparently, according to this denomination, they are debating changes to the discipline which would favor homosexuality. It would also favor removing language calling homosexuality incompatibility with Christian teaching. Now, that's got a number of member churches up in arms. Recently, one of them, Grace Fellowship, U.M.C. of Katy, Texas, voted to leave the United Methodist Church denomination over this debate. According to the Christian Post, the Texas church voted earlier in December of this year to make the split as the United Methodist denomination debates making amendment to the Book of Discipline. They're not waiting for it to be cast in concrete. Jim Leggett, who's the founding pastor of Grace Fellowship, said this past Monday that the congregation wanted to, quote, remove ourselves from the dysfunctional fighting going on in the United Methodist Church so we can fully devote our energies to fulfilling the mission and vision that God has given to us. He said in the last year it's become clear to us that despite having biblical standards of morality on paper, that is in the Book of Discipline, the leadership of the church is unable or unwilling to live by those standards. What this says is they're giving in to the culture, to the mainstream culture. They're buying into their mentality, to the verbiage that they're using about homosexuality. It's all being smoothed over. It's really not a bad thing. It's probably your problem. You just have a bias. But these are just average people living their average lives. They just happen to be homosexual. If you're over the age of, say, 35, you know that's just hogwash. It's not like that. Oh, it may be that way in some situations, some couples, some households, but the movement is not like that. Never has been, never will. There's an estimated 4,200 different religions in the world. Did you know that? That's the ballpark figure. There are probably a lot more than that, smaller entities that don't rise to the top where you can actually see them. But generally speaking, as we look at the world, 4,200 is what we come up with. These are categorized into several main religions. They include Christianity, Roman Catholicism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism. Roman Catholicism is listed separate from Christianity in my list. They didn't do that. It is very often, almost universally categorized as Christianity. There are smaller, yet still prevalent religions like Baha'i and some of those things, which, including Roman Catholicism and Christianity, make up the world's largest group of people. Christianity also includes Protestantism and its many denominations, the Lutherans, the United Methodists, Southern Baptists, Assemblies of God. There are also non-denominational Christians. But Islam is prevalent largely in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. It's broken up into Sunni, Shia, and Sufi groups. Hinduism is dominant in India. Buddhism is prevalent in Asia, such as Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, although it originated in India. One variant of Buddhism is Zen Buddhism. Judaism originated in Israel. Baha'i originated in Iran. There are also numerous indigenous or folk religions throughout the world. All of this is convenient, albeit politically correct, a politically correct listing. And that's because not all so-called Protestant churches are, strictly speaking, Christian. Not the way the Bible would define the term. And Roman Catholicism is not biblically Christian. being a works righteousness system. You have to belong to their church. You have to take you have to go to confession. You have to take communion. There are hundreds of rules, regulations, things you must do. You don't do these things, they excommunicate you, which means you're no longer a Catholic, which means in their view you can't possibly get to heaven. Of course, Catholics don't go to heaven, not initially. In their system, they have a stopping off place. If you're a really good person, a good Catholic, you would go into this stopping off place where you would have to work off your sin. It's a works righteousness system, not a Bible system at all. And after you spend enough time in purgatory or wherever, being punished for whatever sins you commit, you become more pure, then you can go on into heaven. Jesus, talking to his disciples, says, "Tonight thou shalt be with me in paradise." Christianity offers something largely different than all these other religions do. And among the various so-called Christian organizations or churches are the charismatics and the seeker-sensitives. Many of these are not biblically speaking, preaching a Christian message. But we don't define these things very tightly. I mean, we don't spend time parsing the terminology, looking at it and understanding it the way it is. Oh, they claim to be Christians, so they must. According to the Bible, only one religious system is Christian. Just one. No, it's not the Baptists. It's the one that follows the biblical formula. You know, the Bible, the only one true source of information regarding God and what he stands for, what he teaches. We wouldn't know there was a God if we didn't have a Bible. And that the only reliable Bible is the one which can trace its history back to the original autographs, with no cultural and no theological changes. The bottom line here is that salvation, as the Bible teaches it, is by God's grace, through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. It's a faith system, a belief system. It's not a religious system. You don't have to do anything. Now, all this seriously limits the number of true Christians in the world. Many people think they're Christians because they've been to church, or they grew up in a Christian home, or they went to a Christian school, or they read their Bible, they say prayers. They don't get it. And there are religions springing up all over the world, all over this country, confusing the issue. And you have to ask yourself, who would do such a thing with such an important issue? Who would deliberately want to confuse this issue? Only the enemy of your soul. And he has done a marvelous job. 4,200 different religions, all claiming to be the truth. And they're growing. What happens when you threaten a judge? I wouldn't recommend it. A Texas judge is suing the state after she was warned earlier this year that she could not refuse to perform same-sex marriages. According to CBN News, Waco Judge Diane Hensley received a public warning by Texas State Commission on Judicial Conduct after she refused to officiate same-sex marriages. Hensley is a Bible-believing Christian, one who actually believes what the words say, who told reporters that her conscience kept her from performing same-sex weddings. She said she felt she had a religious exemption from performing the ceremonies. Same-sex couples who went to Hensley's office to be married were referred to people who would perform the wedding, but a complaint was filed. quote, for providing a solution to meet a need in my community while remaining faithful to my religious beliefs, I received a public warning, end of quote. No one should be punished for that, she said. She's suing. She's seeking $10,000 in damages. That's to get their attention. Hensley's being represented by First Liberty Institute, a group that specializes in religious liberty cases. First Liberty Institute says the state commission violated state law when it admonished her for her beliefs on same-sex marriage. The state commission did not fine Hensley, but she said the warning substantially burdened the free exercise of her religion with no compelling justification, end of quote. The state commission told the Texas Tribune it had no comment, but the commission had been served with the lawsuit. Ricardo Martinez, Equality Texas CEO, said in its own statement, however, that Hensley took an oath to serve all Texans. These elected officials, it went on, continue to waste taxpayer money in an obsession to discriminate against gay and transgender Texans. This is not what Texans want nor expect from elected officials, Martinez said. Discrimination of any kind is unacceptable. Their actions are mean-spirited, futile, a waste of taxpayer money, and most importantly, it's wrong, they said. I get a question. Homosexuality, by definition, is destructive of the human body. It is destructive of the family. It is destructive of the culture. And here we have a judge swearing an oath to serve all Texans. She is serving them in not participating in a practice that potentially destroys body parts. She's serving them by not encouraging a practice that potentially annihilates the species. She is protecting them by referring these people to those who will. So what's the real story? The judge is upsetting the homosexual effort to corrupt our society, and she can't do that. Bloomberg News is reporting Wall Street sleuths are wondering whether the Federal Reserve is quietly doing more to calm the U.S. reproduction. I got repo. I don't know whether it's reproduction or you're going to repossess. The repo market than just the headline-grabbing liquidity injections that have captivated observers. For you public school educated viewers, the repo market is the sale and repurchase market. Whew, glad I got that straightened out. This is all about government securities. Skeptics believe the government must be doing something. They're just not telling us what. Otherwise, this market would not be up. The New York Fed runs something called the Foreign Reverse Repo Pool, a place where other nations' central banks can park cash. The amount outstanding has shrunk by 18% since peaking at $306 billion in mid-September. A reduction fits with the Fed's goal of building up reserves in the banking system to keep the repo market orderly following the tumult of 3 months ago. When foreign central banks tap the foreign reverse repo pool, it sucks reserves out of the system, working against the central bank's effort to replenish the supply. The result here is that the various participating banks get spooked. Consequently, the central bank began temporarily replenishing reserves via overnight and term repo operations, as well as buying $60 billion a month in Treasury bills. Last Monday's 15-day action, which involved the end of the fiscal year, was undersubscribed, signaling that pressures have eased. All of that from MarketWatch.com. So how did the benchmarks perform? Well, President Trump was, trumpeting the finish last week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 96 points to 28,551.53 to score a third consecutive record finish. Boeing Company delivered the biggest tailwind to the index. The S&P 500 index advanced 3 points at 3,224.01, booking its third straight record close. The Nasdaq Composite Index climbed 21 points. That's 0.2% at 8,945.65. That's its ninth uninterrupted record close, longest streak since 1998. The S&P and Nasdaq both hit new intraday highs Monday morning. Last week, the Dow booked a 1.1% weekly gain. The S&P 500 index was 1.7 over the last period, while the Nasdaq Composite Index climbed 2.2%, marking its largest weekly gain since August 30. All three benchmarks produced a second consecutive weekly advance. The economy is strong and it's booming. Article popped up this week, said judges can no longer perform weddings in New York. Now you'd think this had something to do with the law, or the time judges spend doing this sort of thing, but you'd be wrong. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's a Democrat, liberal as they come, saw a bill cross his desk last week that would allow federal judges to perform weddings in his state, and he didn't like it. So what's wrong with federal judges? You know. They're appointed by the president. And Andrew Cuomo would rather cut his nose off than support this president. He said he couldn't stomach allowing judges appointed by President Donald Trump to perform such ceremonies, citing diversity, tolerance, and inclusion. What are the details? Well, this legislation, referred to by NBC News as non-controversial and bipartisan, was passed 148-2 in the New York Assembly and 61-1 in their Senate. It would have simply opened the door for all federal judges to officiate weddings, something only certain federal judges may do now. Cuomo said, quote, "I cannot in good conscience support legislation that would authorize such actions by federal judges who are appointed by this federal administration. President Trump does not embody who we are as New Yorkers. The only thing he didn't say was, so there." The governor went on to say the cornerstones that build our great state are diversity, tolerance, and inclusion. Based on these reasons, I must veto this bill. Against the will of the people. Democrat State Senator Liz Krueger, who helped sponsor the bill because she viewed it as a no-brainer, reacted to Cuomo's move by telling the New York Post, 4 years ago, we gave the governor the ability to perform marriages. 2 years ago, we gave legislators that same ability. So when it was suggested to me that we expand it to federal judges, I thought, why not? The more the merrier. I'm certainly no fan of the judges this president is choosing to appoint, but since any New Yorker can become a minister online for $25 and legally perform weddings, I didn't consider this to be a major issue. Nick Langworthy, chairman of the New York Republican Party, told the Post of Cuomo's veto, quote, "It's hard to imagine a more petty, small action from a sitting governor," end of quote. You remember the TV program, Who's the Boss? Remember little Samantha? Her name was Alyssa Milano. She's all grown up now. She makes the news every once in a while. She's an ardent liberal, and she's a little bit snarky. She's now 47 years old and wants to change things in Washington. No, she's not going to run for office. She's focused on getting as many people as possible to meditate. Yeah, I didn't mispronounce it, meditate. She tweeted recently, "I need your help manifesting a change of guard in Washington." For 7 minutes a day, I'll be chanting the following mantra. Believe in believing. The impossible is possible. As I do this, I'll be thinking of the special world we want to create. So join me, because we are stronger together. She outlined the particular saying, upon waking, one should lay in Shavasana. This is also known as the corpse pose. You lie down on your back, you relax your body and your mind so that you may fully assimilate the benefits of your asana practice. In yoga, you would set your timer for 7 minutes doing this. While laying, you should repeat the mantra, believe in believing, and possible is possible. She says it's very important that meditators be thinking of the special world they want to create while performing this ritual. And the sad thing about all this is poor Alyssa is entirely serious. But not everybody understood. The jokes just started coming. And Milano wasn't very happy. It wasn't long after the tweet surfaced that Twitchy picked up on it and understandably poked some fun at the idea. The Daily Wire followed a story of its own about the idea, calling it hilarious. Alyssa Milano was not impressed. What is she suggesting? Eastern religions, yoga, all of these contemplative things, they all have the same genesis. They are all in the same family. The goal is to get your body quiet, close off your mind so that you're not thinking of anything. You're not really in charge of what's happening in your mind. Get your whole body in this restful place so that you can contact, you can merge with, or whatever the terminology might be. What they don't realize in the real world is that when you do that, you are not just moving or allowing yourself to be a part of something else. You're allowing something else to be a part of you. And there's spiritual something else's out there that aren't happy people. They're not out for good. Shut down your mind, shut off your protection, and just zone out. Don't be surprised if you get a visitor. Something, someone who now is controlling how you think. And of course, people who are steeped in this, that's what they want. Not the demon possession, but they want to have that connection with the universe. The universe is evil, it's full of demons, and they want your body. They'll never believe it. The Trump administration issued a new rule Friday requiring insurance companies, now if you have an abortion, you will get 2 monthly bills. Huh? One for your insurance, Obamacare, and one for abortion coverage, if you want it. You'll pay extra. Under current law, known as the Hyde Amendment, taxpayer-funded abortion is prohibited except in the cases of rape, incest, and to save the mother's life. The Hyde Amendment is not new. The Hyde Amendment has been around for decades, long before Obamacare. It's just the Democrats didn't care about law. The new rule issued by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, when you see it on your mail, applies to insurance plans within Obamacare's state-based exchanges that cover abortions prohibited under Hyde. CMS estimates that 18 states currently have insurers that offer coverage of abortion services prohibited under law. Those 18 states are the most liberal in the country. Section 1303 of the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare, requires insurance companies that offer plans covering abortion to, quote, collect from each enrollee in the plan, without regard to the enrollee's age, gender, or family status, a separate payment, end of quote, for abortion services. Have they been doing that? The requirement received significant mainstream coverage when Obamacare was debated and was added as a compromise between pro-life and pro-choice groups, although both sides at the time criticized the concept. Now it appears some states have been simply paying for abortions, despite the fact that the law forbids it. Hyde Amendment, 1997. Now, I'm shocked, I don't know about you, that the government would do such a thing. Christy Mizon is pregnant. At 13 weeks of gestation, her water broke. Doctors told her she would likely have a miscarriage. Kirsty said, "I was devastated. I went home and I waited for the inevitable. But it didn't. My baby's heartbeat was still going strong. Doctors then told her that she would need to consider an abortion because they said the baby could be born with abnormalities or stillborn." All the way through the pregnancy, Christy said, they were offering me terminations and saying he will be handicapped and won't be able to use his limbs. They gave him a 1% survival rate because I was constantly losing amniotic fluid. I didn't know if I was strong enough to go through this, but I couldn't give up on my baby. Ms. Owen, 23 years of age, eventually began making funeral arrangements for this baby, and she went into early labor at 29 weeks. Consequently, she gave birth to a baby girl. She said, "I heard my baby cry. It was the best feeling ever. The greatest sound I have ever heard." The midwife turned to me and said, "He is a she. You have a little girl." She said I couldn't believe it. I had kept her in there without fluid for almost 4 months. She named her baby girl Lacey. Lacey's been placed on oxygen. She's doing really well. She will probably be in the hospital, the mother said, until New Year, but she only has one problem, which can be fixed with physiotherapy. Mama says, "I'm still in shock. I just can't believe I have a baby, a beautiful baby girl." She has 2 other children, Leo at 3 and Logan at 2. She wanted a girl. And they said it couldn't be done. Let God be God. He knows better than you do.